Hello, friends. Welcome in. My name is Andrea. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new, you're returning. Welcome back. We have a little bit of a different setup today because we are doing some dice work today. If you don't know, I make dice for Dungeons and Dragons Wow, I cannot talk today. And other tabletop games. You can check out some of my past work over on Instagram or at my shop, both of which are linked in chat. I've been making dice for about 2.5, well, not quite 2.5, a little over 2 years now. I love this community. I love being able to share some of my expertise that I've learned over the course of doing this for so long. And that's one of the things that I think is really cool about this community. Today, we are going to be doing a few different things. We're going to be doing a floral pour. So I have just some different floral pieces here. We're going to be doing, trying out this Angelina fiber. I use the film a lot. I've never used the fiber. This is a lemon sparkle. It's very shiny. It's like threads, basically. So we're going to try that out. I'm going to attempt to do like a portal pour. I haven't tried that before, but I want to try it with my new Chunky Boys. We're going to get some blanks prepped, and then we're also going to be casting blanks. So if you don't know what blanks are, they are dice, kind of. So these are all of the same shapes as my dice, but they're actually a little bit smaller than my standard dice. So you can see here, they're just a smidge smaller, not a lot, and they don't have numbers on them. And the reason for that is that you pour the blanks and then you cast them in your regular molds to get the numbers. And that allows you to do different things. I did these because there's sand in them, and I didn't want the texture of the sand to come through if it did, or when I'm like sanding it. So that's one of the reasons I did this. You can use them for inclusions if you want to prevent like inclusion breaching. You can paint them. A lot of makers will like cover them in stickers. We're not doing that today. We're just going to be doing a little bit of a white swirled pour with these to get some more foaminess for a nice ocean wave effect. We're going to be doing those last because it's a really messy process. And so that's kind of the thing that you want to do last. I also want to prep some of this cellophane mylar, people call it different things, for the floral pour, because I want to try combining some of the floral bits with some of the like galaxy techniques. So we're going to start by doing some prep work. I'm going to cut some of this cellophane first. It doesn't really matter what size. Obviously you don't want it giant because you are going to be sticking it in dice. But I'm just going to cut, let's see, I'm doing 3 sets, so I need 21 pieces. We've got 1, 2, 3, probably a couple extra just in case. So I'm just going to kind of haphazardly cut this into little pieces. It's kind of crinkly because I've had this particular sheet for a while. It's on its last legs. There's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to this. It doesn't need to be uniform. In fact, it's better if it's not exact squares. So some of these I'm just kind of snipping and then tearing, letting it do what it wants. Really does not matter because you are going to be crinkling these. I am cutting these a little bit smaller than I would if I was just doing a regular galaxy dice set, because I'm also going to have florals in here. And I want to make sure there's room for everything. So I am cutting this slightly smaller than I normally would. My scissors are also kind of dull, which is making this a little tricky. I need to get some new scissors up here, but that is okay. So this has a really cool, you can kind of see it's like purple, green, a little bit of orangey, like red in there. And so when you crinkle this up and you stick it in dice, you kind of capture all those colors when the dice are moving around, and you get some really cool effects, especially when they're all nice and crinkled. So we're going to prep this first. I'm prepping stuff because it's a lot easier to do this when I'm not wearing gloves. And safety equipment is really important when working with resin. So as soon as we get the resin out, the gloves are coming on. I am in a well-ventilated space, doing all the proper protective things. So we have a nice little pile here that we'll use. I also need to, this doesn't need cut, but we're gonna open this. So we're gonna, when we get to the florals, we're also gonna put these pink, or these white florals in. I've got some like blues, and then these purple ones. This needs cut open. So, like I said, we are going to do the blanks, the blank casting last because it's very messy, and I like to have the least amount of things out as possible. Some other things just to note, if you are interested in working with resin, please do your research and make sure you're working with it safely because it is very not good for your health if you don't know what you're doing. And that doesn't get talked about enough on social media when I see like resin TikToks and things, especially the like tumblers. Like, please wear gloves. At least bare minimum, put gloves on and make sure you're like working in a well-ventilated space. It will make everything so much better and safer for you. We don't want people getting sick. Some other things I'm just gonna grab. I have this Slice of the Moon mica powder. It's silver. I use this in pretty much every dice pour. I have had that container since I started making dice 2 years ago, and I've only used half of it because a little does go a long way. I'm going to grab a couple of color powders from Chromatic Castle, just because I like putting those in my galaxy dice. And I think we're ready to get started. So what that means is we're going to put our gloves on, because resin is sticky. It can cause allergic reactions. It can cause all sorts of things that we don't want in our person. So you want to make sure when you're working with resin that you're using nitrile gloves because some resins can have negative reactions to latex. Not all of them. Some of them do, some of them don't. I just always use the nitrile gloves. I also got the wrong size. And I got 1,000 of them, so they're a little on the small side. That'll work a little bit to get these on, but that's okay. I will be pouring dice today in molds made from my masters. So I have master dice that were 3D printed, and they have my logos and specific fonts that I wanted, so they were kind of designed for this purpose. The next thing I'm going to do before I mix up the resin is I'm going to put the florals in for my floral dice, because we're going to start with those just because it's the most stuff I have out and we'll be able to put some things away. So this is what a mold looks like. This one is slightly yellow stained from an alcohol ink pour that I did, but the ink won't transfer because it's old. So you can kind of see down in there. This one has the logo on the D6, and then it has an alternate D4 shape. I don't use Caltrop D4s anymore because I think they suck. They're really hard to stand and hold, and I'm not a fan. And then this is what the cap looks like. So I choose to put the cap numbers as the low face, so that if there is some sort of issue that I have to patch, it's not taking away from like the 20. If you roll a crit, you want to enjoy that. So that's a personal preference. I do have some molds that are flipped so that the high face is the cap face. It kind of just depends on personal preference and also what you're making. Because some designs you're going to want to be able to control the top, and things tend to float to the surface, so sometimes it makes sense to do that. But we're going to go ahead and start mixing up resin. I'm going to mix up a ton of resin and then split that up into the different pours. We are using Chromatic Cast from Chromatic Castle. This is the resin I've been using lately, and I have absolutely loved it. I haven't had any curing issues except for user error. It cures really hard. It sands really well. And we're going to be making about 200 milliliters of resin to kind of cover all of the stuff I want to pour today. And this is a part A, part B resin. So first I'm going to mix out the part A, which I just did. And then part B is the hardener. This is a 1-to-1 by volume resin. So what that means is if I'm pouring out 100 of part A, I'm going to pour out 100 of part B. So that we have that 1-to-1 ratio. Some resins are 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. Some of them are 1-to-1 by weight, not by volume. So you definitely want to make sure, if you're working with resin, to read the specifics of your resin so you don't mix it improperly and then it doesn't cure. So this is the boring part. This is the part where we mix resin for several minutes to make sure it's fully incorporated in the part A and part B. I use a pressure pot, so when I am mixing, I am not being super careful about bubbles because I know that the pressure pot is going to compress that out. You can make dice without a pressure pot. It is more difficult, and you have to be a lot more careful in a lot of your steps. For example, you would not just want to whip your resin like I am currently doing, because as you can see, it is creating some bubbles in the resin. And if you don't have a pressure pot, you want to generate as few bubbles as possible, because bubbles are the #1 thing that's going to cause voids in your dice, and it's also the #1 thing that is most likely to make your dice imbalanced. There's a lot of questions in the makerspace about how handmade dice can or cannot be balanced, and as long as there's not giant holes in them or giant bubbles, they are just as likely to be balanced as any of your factory dice. And your factory-made dice might have bubbles in them too. So I'm going to go ahead and put the silver mica powder in this big cup, because it's going to go in every single dice pour, so I'd rather just mix it in now. It'll also kind of help me see if there's any areas that haven't been mixed, and we want to mix this for like 3 to 4 minutes to make sure that the part A and part B are fully combined. I'm scraping the sides, I'm making sure to scrape along the bottom, because we don't want any pockets of unmixed resin, so that we get fully cured dice. When I was first making dice, this was the part that always scared me, and I would literally set up a timer to make sure I would mix for a solid 5 minutes. I don't do that so much anymore because I can kind of just tell if the resin hasn't been mixed very well now that I've been doing it for so long. But if you are just starting out with resin, I definitely recommend reading the directions really carefully and making sure that you mix for that minimum time. Since when you're learning, it's so hard to kind of troubleshoot when dice don't work out. That's one of the really easy things that you can do to make sure that you're being consistent with how you're mixing your resin. So we have a big old cup of resin here. I am now going to start placing some of my florals into my molds. So I have 2 full set molds here, and I also have a jewelry mold. So this mold has 2 D4s, 2 D10s, and then a D6, D8, and D20, because those are the most popular dice to buy not in a set. And then I use the D4s and the D10s for jewelry pretty frequently, because they make very beautiful jewelry shapes. What is happening here? Oh, there's like a clear piece. I understand. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pull out some of these purple ones, and I'm just going to kind of I'm going to fling purple flowers into my freshly mixed resin. Oh no, we don't want that. But I'm basically just going to kind of break some of these sprigs off and place them in the dice first. I'm kind of going to do these purple ones here, and then we're going to do the white, and then we'll end with these bigger ones because those are going to take up more space, and I want to make sure we have some of the smaller ones down at the bottom. These are very dry, so they are kind of just breaking and flinging everywhere. So we're probably going to fling some flowers, and that's okay. As far as like how many or how I'm putting them in, I'm not necessarily like saying every die must get 2 flowers. It's kind of dependent on space and size of the dice. So the bigger dice, the D12, the D20, those usually get more of the inclusions. And then the smaller dice tend to just get fewer just because they don't need as many to look full. Yeah, we have little flowers going everywhere. These are very crunchy. Where did that go? I'm gonna be finding flowers all over my office. Is what I'm gathering after this. But that's okay. The other thing to note is resin is thick. It's pretty dense, so these are going to float a little bit. So when I'm placing them, I am trying to kind of create some interesting angles, but I'm also not super worried about it because I know that a lot of this is going to move around once we get the fluids in. So I'm mostly just trying to make sure that there's like a good amount in each of the die and not necessarily agonizing so much about the placement of them. You can control the placement. You could UV resin these in place if you wanted to. For this, I'm not so worried about them being like perfectly placed. I just want them to be nicely filled with the different inclusions. So that's kind of the rationale for that. I have apparently had these for a while because I have not had florals this crispy in quite a while. So this is like a bigger piece. Here you can see it's got a few different ones, so I'm going to put that one in the D20, I think. I also am, reminding myself this is the first of 3 different florals we're going to be putting in, as well as some of that crinkly mylar, so that we don't want them to be super full of one floral, because we are adding other things as well. So for those of you hanging out, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If I can answer them, I will. I think that's one of the really cool things about this community is we're all really open about like what we do and how we do it. We might not give exact like color recipes or things like that, but a lot of people are willing to share techniques and strategies that they've used. I've learned a lot from people in this maker space, so I like doing these streams to kind of give some of that knowledge back to new people, because if people were really gatekeepy with their secrets and their techniques, I wouldn't be the maker I am today. And I'm really grateful for how open this space is. Okay, I think they all have purple, so we're going to go ahead and tuck this back in here. We're going to make a big mess, and I'm going to set this off to the side. We don't need this one anymore. Next, I'm going to go in with this white floral for a little bit of contrast and color. So this is just a sprig of kind of white. I don't know what flower this is. I am not good with flower names, but they're pretty and they look really nice in dice. So again, I'm just kind of going to find a nicely shaped sprig, and we're going to kind of just tuck it in. Get some of differing sizes, try and place them in, differing directions in the mold. This is definitely one of the more time-consuming parts of dice making, is mold prep. Just because you want to make sure you don't miss a die. I have pulled dice before and realized I forgot to put one of an inclusion in a single die, and that die always looks really funny. So you definitely want to be careful, take your time, but you also do want to move kind of quickly because your resin will start setting. I probably could have done this before mixing the resin, but I want the resin to be a little bit thicker for some of the inclusions we're going to be putting in. So it's a balancing act for sure. So we are almost done prepping, and then we'll get to do our first little bit of resin pouring here. Just trying to find some nice shaped little floral bits for these jewelry ones especially. I want to make sure that those look super great. And the nice thing about the jewelry molds is if I have like a die that turns out funky for the full sets, I have some extras that I can use. And then potentially use the jewelry ones as replacements because they don't need to be quite as perfect since I'm going to be putting holes in them anyway. Alright, and then the last thing, do I want to put these? I might not. I might hold off on those and see how they look once we get everything in. Okay, so now that we're kind of set up there, I am going to pour out some of my mixed resin into a separate cup so that we can kind of get this prepped. I want to put a little color shift in this one just to give it a little extra oomph. And we're going to start pouring. So this, we're going to start with clear because I want to make sure we can see the florals really well. And I'm going to fill the molds about halfway. I'm trying to pour in a nice thin stream so that way the resin can soak through the flowers that are in there and get all the way through to the bottom of the mold. So we're just pouring nice and high in a thinner stream. The thinner the stream, the better, because that's also going to allow some of the air to escape. And then we're going to put in our cellophane to get some of that reflective galaxy vibe. And then I'm actually going to top this with a colored, I'm going to call it a base because it's going to be at the one face of the dice. But we're actually going to use some pigment paste and make a pink base for these, I think. Or we might, maybe we'll just use mica. I have a really pretty pink mica that I think would look great. So we might just do that. This is also part of the process. Sometimes you just change your mind. Okay. So we cut up this really reflective stuff earlier, and now it is time to put it in the die. So all I do is take a piece. We're going to crumple it a little bit in between my fingers so that it's a smaller shape like so. And then we're just going to tuck it into each of the dice, trying to press it a little bit of the way into the resin. We want it to be small enough that it's going to fit into the mold, but we don't want it to be so tinily crumpled that you can't really see it. So depending on the shape, kind of depends on the size I try and get it when I crumple it. So you can kind of see here, we've just got this really cool reflective bit of material there. All right, now we're just going to do that for all of the dice, and then we'll put some color in. I'll talk about the different colorants that you can use when you're making dice and kind of the situations or the pros and cons of each. This is a smaller piece, so I'm going to move this over to our skinny D4 over here, just because it's a smaller piece and that's a smaller shape. You definitely don't want to use your smallest pieces in your biggest dice, because then they just look kind of empty. So the goal for this is we want to put a colored backdrop so that this will pop a lot more, because if you just have this in clear, it will be visible, but the effect won't be as strong or as noticeable if there's not a darker backdrop to it, which is why a lot of Galaxy dice will have a lighter color and then a darker color so that you can really see the effects of the shiny things that are being included. And we're going to use that same concept for these florals. So even though we're not making a true Galaxy set, we're going to use the same premise. If you're curious how I make Galaxy dice, I do have, I have done some of those on the stream. I have all of my VODs uploaded to YouTube. And there's a playlist for my dice making stream. So if you want to see some of the other designs that we've done, I definitely recommend checking that out. The titles kind of describe what gets poured in each one, so that's a good way to kind of sift through and decide if you want to watch any of those. And the YouTube channel is linked in the Twitch bio that's down at the bottom. We are almost done here with our cellophane. Just doing a quick check. You definitely don't want to skip a die with this because that will be very noticeable. And it looks like I'm one piece short, so I'm just going to kind of tear this in half. And we'll do less of a crinkle for these. These are for earrings, so it's okay if it's a little bit different anyway. Alright. So now that's done, I'm going to get a little bit more of this clear resin. I don't need a ton since we're using that for all of our pours. Oh, I wasn't missing one. I had it right here. Well, let me tuck this in maybe to a D20 that looks a little empty. Give it a little more oomph. Alright, so for this, we're going to use a mica powder. This is the Rollo. Hello, focus. It's not going to focus. This is the Flamingo Pink. And so this is an opaque powder. This is one way that you can color your resin. It's not the only way. It is one way. Some of the benefits of mica powders is that they are opaque. Whereas alcohol inks, which we're going to use in another pour, are transparent. You can build opacity with alcohol inks, but then you risk using too much and potentially altering the chemical makeup of your dye. I am going to add a drop of white to this just to soften it a little bit. This is a very vibrant pink, and I want to make it a little bit of a softer pink. So we're going to combine some colorants here just to give this a little bit of lightness. And so we're left with this really rich, beautiful pink color. It is a little bit shimmery, again, because of the mica powder. And we're just going to go ahead and fill in the rest of our mold here with this pink color. Again, you want to make sure you're pouring nice and high with a nice thin stream. That's going to help fill all the crevices in your dice. And it's also going to help minimize some of the air bubbles as it's going in. And when we're working with florals and cellophane, you're going to have air bubbles. So the more you can minimize, the better off you're going to be. And the hope is that this pink backdrop will create a nice contrast to that clear and then the cellophane. I did not make enough pink, so we're going to make some more. That happens, and that's why we just adjust. Give this a good mix, and then we shall continue. So I have never combined cellophane and florals before. This is a new thing we're trying. Hopefully it works out well. It looks cool. I'm excited about the color combinations we've got here. I went with really minimal florals. I went with really small floral pieces to try and give the cellophane some space and to just create some like visual interest. So hopefully it looks cool. Unfortunately, the hardest part of dice making is putting things in the pressure pot and waiting all day to pull them, because you never know what you're gonna get. Just gonna fill these up. So one thing you can kind of see, I'll move it so you can get a better look. The D12 in my middle mold has a giant air bubble in it right now. And that is probably because it got kind of caught in the cellophane. So there's this giant air bubble here. I'm actually just going to pop it. And we're going to put some more resin in there. These larger bubbles, it is really helpful to pop before putting your caps on to make sure that there's enough resin to fill the die fully. And then we are also kind of slightly overfilling. You don't want to overfill too much, because then it's harder to get your lids on. But it is helpful to slightly overfill just so that when the air is compressed, your resin is going to shrink and you need resin to kind of take that space. The last thing I'm doing is just hitting the top of this quickly with a lighter. You don't want to do too much because if the resin gets too hot, it will fuse to your silicone and you will ruin your molds, which is absolutely devastating because molds are a pain to make and or they're expensive to purchase. So I'm just checking now to make sure any really large bubbles have gotten out. We're going to put the lids on these, set them to the side so that they're ready to go in the pressure pot, and then we're going to do a couple of chunky D20s with a couple of different techniques. We're going to pour some blanks that I'm going to carve up for geode dice, and then we'll cast our blank dice so we can see what that process is like. I'm just going to set this leftover resin off to the side. I might use it later. I have a bunch of dump molds. I have like tic-tac-toe molds, earring molds, so all of the resin does get used. I try not to waste any of it, just to be conscious of that. Okay, so for our chonky molds, so these are large D20s. These are 30 millimeter D20s instead of the standard like 24 or whatever it is. So I'm going to pour out a little bit of resin in 2 different cups. We're going to do 2 different techniques here, neither one of which I've ever done before, but I have seen other people do them, so we're experimenting today. So the first one, I'm going to use some Pinata Magenta. This is an alcohol ink, so it's going to be transparent. Apparently I'm feeling pink and yellow today, because that's what we're working with. So I'm just going to get a little bit of this pink in here. I'm going to put some color shift powders in here as well, because I like color shift powder. There's no other reason, I just like it. And I think it looks cool. I'm going to put some in both of these since I have it open. I'm going to give this a mix. I'm going to fill this mold like halfway-ish. And then I'm going to prep my other one where we're actually going to use some yellow resin. And with the alcohol inks, you want to like start with only a drop or 2 because it is transparent and you can build opacity, but once you have too much in there, you can't really take it out. So this is a nice yellow color. It's really faint, and I want it to be faint because we're going to layer some different things in here. And I'm also going to fill this mold a little bit less than halfway. So, for the pink resin, we are going to attempt to use this Angelina fiber. It's kind of like the Mylar we used in the last sets, except instead of sheets, it's just this like thin, stringy stuff. So I am going to kind of pull some out, twist it up a bit, and we're just going to shove it in here. it seems to be very messy. It doesn't seem to want to all go in. We're gonna just tuck that in there a little bit. Maybe. We'll let that sit. We're actually gonna put some more of this pink in. I'm going to let that sit for a little bit so that it can start soaking through the fibers. And then we're going to get a pigment paste for our other one. So this is the Just Resin Rose Gold. And so a pigment paste is similar to a mica powder in that it is opaque. But this is just a different consistency. It creates different colors, different textures. And this is basically a resin paste without the hardener, so it's color mixed with part A of resin. We're going to mix this up. And the reason I'm going to use this is because this is going to be a much different density than our resin. It's going to move and kind of sink and float. So I'm going to just pull a very, very little bit of that into a little bit of clear. And we're going to get a really rich color without having to use very much. So this is a really rich pink pigment. It's beautiful. It looks great. We're going to be using this again later, so I'm just going to set that off to the side. And what I'm going to do is in this yellow mold, I'm going to now create a layer of this pink so that the mold is now about halfway full. And we're going to let that sit for a little bit. We're going to go back to our pink. I want to give this a little bit more depth of color, so I'm going to put a little drop of orange into our pink resin, but I'm not going to mix it. And that's going to create ribbons of color on top of the pink. So when we pour it, we're going to have ribbons of the orange mixing with the pink. It's not going to be a consistent effect. Hopefully it looks cool. Won't know until we pull it. And I'm going to take this yellow resin and we're going to pour super high, super thin, and hopefully that's going to create a little bit of movement and texture in that dye. These are looking great. These were really simple pours. They didn't need a lot of prep, which was really nice because we spent a lot of time prepping our last one. And we're getting close to the end here, so I'm going to put this yellow stuff away. We're going to cap these. When you put your caps on, you want to press down a little bit, but you don't want to squeeze so much that you're squeezing all of the resin out. So you just kind of wiggle them on, give them a gentle pat so that the lids lock in. We're getting the super excess resin out, but not necessarily anything else. I'm going to set these off to the side so that we can do our blank mold. And then we'll be ready to cast our blanks. So I mentioned earlier that a blank mold is, these don't have numbers. These are smaller versions of my dice. There's no numbers in them. And we're doing this because then we have options when we go to cast our dice. So I'm actually going to get a little bit more of this pink, and I'm going to get another cup ready. And we are going to be doing a pink and black dirty pour in this blank dice set. Because what I'm hoping to do is carve these to make some more geode dice. I've been real into those lately. Geode dice I have a friend that gave me some crushed opal that it's absolutely beautiful. This is very chunky, so we gotta mix this. We don't want it to be that chunky. But this is gonna give us a nice rich black without having to use like 8 to 10 drops of alcohol ink and risking our dice not curing, which is a benefit of the pigment paste. So we're going to mix this in to get a black. And then we're going to do kind of a dirty pour, kind of not a dirty pour. So a traditional dirty pour, you either use a split cup and you layer, different colors. You can do an alcohol ink dirty pour where you just drip a color on here, and we are going to be dripping some white onto this. But I'm also going to be layering the pink onto the black. So what I'm going to do, we have our pink, we have our black. We've got some stuff in the way, that's fine. So I'm going to put 2 drops of this white alcohol ink on top of the surface of the black. I'm not going to mix it in. Then I'm going to pour some of this pink, kind of drizzle it in there. Again, I'm not going to mix it because I want ribbons of these colors. So when we pour, we'll get the different colors coming through as we go. Then we'll stop. We'll put some more of the pink in. We'll put some more of the white. So that we can make sure each pour gets a little bit of the colors. Kind of move it around a smidge. Again, we're not stirring because I don't want the colors to mix. But this is going to create some really nice veining and just randomness of the color, which we want. As I'm pouring, I'm keeping the streams nice and thin. Kind of wiggling it around a little so that those colors can kind of blend together a little bit. And then we're going to put the rest of this pink in here. We don't have a lot left, but we're going to get the rest of it into this cup. So if you're curious what I mean by geodice, I did share some recently. I have 3 currently that are coming in the next shop update. And basically what these are going to be is these blanks are going to be carved. And I'm going to be hand securing some crushed opal into the carved areas. And then those will get cast inside the numbered molds so that the outside of them have numbers. So you'll have the like really shiny opal pieces in the dice. Okay, this looks great. I'm going to set this off to the side to let that drain out. And we're going to get ready to cast our blanks, which I mentioned is a very messy process because it is. It's very messy. So again, giving this a nice little pat. I'm not as worried about this mold because they are going to get cast into other dice. But it's still good to be thorough and get everything secure as much as you can. Okay. We have a lot of stuff here. I'm going to dump some of this resin into my dump mold. I am currently making a pastel transparent tic-tac-toe board with all of my excess resin that is transparent. It's fun. It looks really cute. So that's been a lot of fun. We're going to get our blanks ready. So I have these like beachy, oceany blanks. And the vision is that we are going to cast them in some clear resin that has a little bit of white dripped into it so that it looks more like, you know, the water foaming up when it hits like the beach or the rocks. I'm going to dump this yellow into my dump mold because we don't need that. It'll give us a little more space. This part is very messy, which is why we're doing it last. If you are doing this and you're planning on doing other dice afterwards, I would recommend doubling up on your gloves so that when you have like the giant mess all over your hands, you don't have to take your gloves off and then not have gloves on. But we're not doing another resin pour after this, so it doesn't matter. I'm also going to take the rest of this like pink and black mixture and stick it in one of my meeple molds. I give out meeples with like orders as freebies. They're just like little resin character pieces. They're kind of cute. Some of them I also turn into jewelry. If I have like matching pairs, I'll make earrings out of them. But we're just going to kind of fill this up so that I can have as clear a surface as possible for this. Because we're about to make a big mess. So I have 2 of these. One of them I'm not sure how they're going to turn out. So I had these have just like giant voids. So we're still going to try casting them. But I am much less hopeful about those ones as I am about the darker ones. So I am going to, we're going to get a cup. So we have just the last of our clear resin. We don't need a ton for this because, you know, most of the dye is already cast. So I'm hoping we have enough clear resin left. I might have to mix up just a little bit more, but we'll get there if we need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to drop some white into this clear. We're going to fill these not even half, like maybe a quarter of the way. Basically, I just want to coat the bottom of the mold and have a little bit extra kind of seeping up the sides. Because we're going to be sticking our blanks in here. So again, just putting the faintest amount in here. And what's going to happen is because these are sized so that they are roughly the number depth smaller than my normal numbers, it should perfectly fill the dice. So we're just going to tuck these in, kind of push them down. And you basically want to match the shapes. Why is this one giving me troubles? I'm also trying to put the black part face up because I would prefer that to be the one side. And then the D12 rotated a little bit. I have the hardest time getting the D12s to go in and the D20s to go in like the correct direction. And we're gonna put a little bit more resin in here. Yeah, I'm gonna need to mix probably just a little bit more. Which is fine, we can do that. Because I'm worried that there's not enough resin in here. So now I'm just kind of going back. I'm pushing the blanks down because I want to make sure they're all the way down at the bottom of the mold as far as possible. I'm topping them up with some more resin. Yeah, like the D12 definitely needs some more resin. The D6 probably needs a little bit more. Yeah, we're gonna have to mix up a little bit more. So I'm gonna do that before pouring or putting the second half in. I'm gonna just mix up the least amount I can. We're gonna have a bunch extra, that's fine. I'll just use the extra in my dump mold. But we're gonna mix up a little extra resin. Because sometimes you make too much yellow resin and then you don't have enough clear. And that's fine. It happens when you're making a large batch of dice. Sometimes you just need to mix up a little more. So that's what we're going to do. I am using a different cup because I don't want the measurements to be off. And I don't want anything else to kind of interfere with the process of measuring out and pouring the resin. And then you can see here, there's a bubble popping up on this D10 because the resin is trying to seep through and there's also some air in there, so that's why we definitely need more resin. I put a little bit of the glitter in here just for consistency. We want it to look the same as the rest of our resin. So we're just giving this a really good mix. Again, I'm not as worried about bubbles. I mentioned this at the top of the stream. I use a pressure pot, so the air is going to get compressed out of here. If you don't use a pressure pot, you want to be a lot more careful when you're mixing, because the more air bubbles you incorporate, the more you have to worry about while you're pouring your dice. So we're going to give this a good mix. We are nearing the end, which is quite exciting. I'm going to transfer this. The only reason I'm transferring it is because I find it easier to pour from these paper cups because they bend than it is to pour from the measuring cups. I'm going to go through and just top off these a little bit more to give more of the resin time to sink down there. You want to fill them but not overfill, so it's definitely a fine balance. And I'm going to go through and actually put a little bit more resin in the other mold just so that there's a little more to kind of seep up through the sides. Get a little bit more of that white in there as well. We want it to look sea foamy. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for this one. We're not going to stick my hair in there. Again, I'm going to make sure that the sand, the black, is closer to the one face as much as I can. And you can see there's more resin in here, so they're gooing up a lot more, which is exactly what you want. And then, like I said, a couple of these have voids, so I'm not sure how these are going to look in the dice since they have some like weird holes in them, but we're gonna find out. That's part of what's really cool about dice making, is so much of it is experimenting and kind of seeing what works and what doesn't, which I absolutely love. You find techniques that you love and then you just want to do them in as many colors as you can. Just gonna pop this last one in here. This is not rotated like it needs to, so I'm gonna poke at it with a popsicle stick to try and get it to be the direction it needs to be so that it sets properly. We're going to just pat these all down as much as we can and then go back and fill them up. Again, pouring nice and slow, thin lines. You definitely want that air, especially for something like this where it's going to be so easy to trap air. You want to give your air as much time as possible to get out of the dice. I'm going to go through and just press all the blanks down to make sure if there is any air trapped that we're getting them out. This D8 seemed to have an air bubble that was stuck in it, so I'm glad we did that. Any large bubbles, I'm just going to kind of coax to the side of the dice so that they're not on top of the die. We just want to make sure those blanks are nice and secure down there. These are looking really, really good. I'm a little worried about the D8 on the lighter set purely because it had a weird void that's kind of making it hard to get in the right angle, but we're going to see what happens. So my hands are coated in resin, which is par for the course when you are putting your blanks in your shells, just because it's messy. If you don't like messy things, I would not recommend investing in blanks. There's no way around the mess there. So these are also finished. We're going to set those off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and just start consolidating all of my extra resin. I don't like to waste it, so we are just going to continue. We'll have some nice white in the dump molds, and then we'll just use the clear as well. There's not a ton left, but unfortunately it's hard to mix resin in small amounts, so we have a little bit extra, more than we would have otherwise, but that's okay. And then after this, these dice are going to get put in my pressure pots. They will be compressed and curing for about 12 hours-ish, roughly, 10 to 12 hours before they're ready to be pulled. And then they take another 2 to 3 days to fully cure before you can start sanding them. If you sand resin too early, you risk ruining the finish on them. And then they're a lot harder to get shiny, which is always a bummer. We definitely don't want that. So if you are curious to see what these dice turn out like, I know I'm curious to see the chunky D20s because I've never done anything like either of those. Definitely recommend giving my Instagram a follow. I always post demolding sneak peeks or reels over on Instagram. I did take the gloves off because I am getting ready to clean up, and I like cleaning with a clean pair of gloves just so that I'm not getting sticky stuff all over the place. And we're just going to be wrapping up the stream here because nobody needs to listen to an air compressor for 2 to 4 minutes. It's very loud, it's not very exciting, and you can't see it anyway. I am just going to kind of hit a couple of things with some isopropyl alcohol. So if you were hanging out for the stream today, I really appreciate it. I do these occasionally. I don't do these all the time, but I do stream pretty regularly on Tuesdays and Sundays. If you're interested in more resin pouring streams, or you just like the vibes and want to hang out at the channel, definitely recommend giving a follow so you get notified when I go live. If you're interested in a chance to win some dice, I am part of a charity stream over on my friend Marco's channel that is happening. Hello? My exclamation point is not working. That's weird. Okay. If you're interested in a chance to win some dice, we are having a charity stream over on my friend Marco's channel tomorrow. It is a 12-hour charity stream where we are raising funds for abortion health access. I believe it's NARAL is the specific charity that we're raising funds for. And we're going to be playing D&D for 12 hours tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific time. So that would be a great chance to hang out, see some crazy D&D action, and also get a chance to win some gorgeous dice. Otherwise, if you are interested in purchasing some dice or dice jewelry, you can check out my shop and my Instagram. I am having a shop update on July 15th, which is this coming Friday, where there will be a bunch of new items getting added to the shop, including the first blank dice that have the opals in them. They're absolutely gorgeous, and I'm so excited to have those finished. And then the last thing, if you want to just get updates about what's going on, another great place to follow is Twitter. I post scheduling updates and life updates and all sorts of things there, including random streams like this one that are not part of my normal schedule, but I'm doing them anyway. So that's another really great place to connect on the internet, since I can't communicate outside of Twitch, outside of just going live. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're excited to see how these dice turned out, and I will see you all later. Bye, everyone.